Welcome to the Bulletproof Podcast. My name is Gary. I go by Gary the Expert, and I have a special episode for you today for my very first guest, Austin. How are you doing today?
Man, I'm great, buddy. Thank you so much for having me on.
For sure. You are my very first guest, and I will tell you why you are my very first guest. Austin doesn't know I'm going to say this or any reasons why, but the real reason is because I've like 30 or 40 people asking to get on my podcast, and in very frequent basis it happens, but I never bite. I never take a reason or bite. And Austin, you have a special pass today for that reason. Why? Why do you have a special pass? Well, actually, I was reading your story. I've got like three or four categories of people. People that definitely are relevant for the podcast, people that talk about mental health, and then there's people with addiction experience, and those people are very, very much interested in me. Your story is something that I'm fascinated by, and I think it can help me. It can help a lot of listeners here that have gone through addiction, and I'm very blessed for you to be here. So, without further ado, let's get into this in some way, shape, or form. Austin, do you have anything to say before we start? And then I'll ask you some questions on yourself.
Yeah, no, nothing really to say except it's a pleasure to be chatting with you. That was a very flattering intro you just gave me, Gary. So I hope I can meet that high bar that you just set. I'm sure I
Great,
can. Well,
great.
let's get after it. Let's do it.
Perfectionism will try to get this bar even higher at the end of this. No, awesome, awesome. There's no pressure. By the way, if anyone else is interested in Austin, go to One Last Hit. That is his podcast, or you can get his book, onelast.hitbook.com. We'll plug it at the end as well. But with that being said, Austin, your story, let's start there. And I want to stick on the story as much as possible. And
Sure.
then we'll get into the recovery element of it towards the end. The story is massively empowering for me. I could tell you several dozen stories of people. And wow. Take me back. Take me back. Where does this start for you, Austin, in some way?
Oh yeah. Let's get after
Back
it.
to
So
Tampa. Hmm.
yeah, so I was born in Texas and moved to Tampa when I was 5.
Hmm.
And then at the age of 7, I moved to Tokyo, Japan.
Wow.
And so when I was a kid, I had really, really bad neurological tics, terrible. Like my body would twitch. I would make noises, like in the back of the classroom, like, and I had no control over it whatsoever. And I was overweight and the kids were just brutal. And I just
Wow.
have this, like, if I were to name a feeling that I was constantly walking around with as a child, it would be two: shame and anxiety. Those were my two, but I didn't
Wow.
have those words when I was a kid, right? I didn't know how to express that. Really, what I felt was everyone's better than me. I'm just losing constantly. But I was fairly good at baseball, mainly because I was a lot bigger than the other kids. And so I did notice when I would go hit home runs or win the game for our team or something like that, I would get special praise from my dad. Like he was so proud to claim me as his son. And so somehow early on, I got the message that if I achieve, right, I'm worthy. And the opposite also somehow landed on me, which is that if I don't achieve, I'm not. And when I got back to the United States, it was the summer I turned 13 years old. And the other kids in the neighborhood, I had known some of them, but some of them were quite a bit older than me, 16, 17, 18, and they had already gotten into like a lot of the stuff that teenagers get into. And I remember my first buzz like viscerally.
Hmm.
It was 3 tall boy beers at a buddy of mine's in a buddy of mine's garage. We stole it from his dad.
You're talking about being
And
drunk.
it
First time you're drunk, is it? The buzz.
first time, yeah, first time I caught a buzz. First,
Hmm.
like, so it was, I remember getting through one and I didn't like the taste very much, but everyone else was doing it. So I was like, all right, I'll have another one. And then it was like right into the third that thing happened. And I don't, it's hard to explain that thing. I think that feeling comes over almost anyone who drinks, but the feeling of absolute relief that I felt having been wound so tight for my entire life, the way that I experienced it was like if you've ever been driving in a rainstorm, a really, really bad rainstorm, and then you go under an overpass
Hmm.
and it's just quiet for a minute. And it was the first time I'd experienced the quiet. Like it was just okay. And from that point forward, I remember the very clear thought in my mind that this is so good. Why would I ever want to be sober? Like no thought of the consequences whatsoever. And so from that point forward, sobriety became almost horrific for me. Like I would drift back into the anxiety and the shame that I had carried around for so long, still not knowing how to name them.
What age were you
And then
at
I would
this?
have moments of I mean, we're still 13, 14 years old at
All
this
right.
point.
All right.
In my first 6 months of use, I started smoking pot. I started taking Xanax. I took acid and painkillers within like year 13. By age 15, 16, I'm addicted to painkillers, like a full on addiction. And
Okay.
by age 17, I'm smoking crack. It went that quick. Like, give
Austin,
me what you got.
Austin, it's unbelievable. So far, unbelievable already. I think the most important question on every listener's eyes, ears, should I say, is did you learn Japanese when you were in Japan?
Yeah. That's funny. So I went to a school called ASIJ, American School in Japan. They weren't very creative with their names,
Mm.
apparently.
Mm.
And I was required to take Japanese every semester. And I did become relatively fluent while I lived there, and I could read it very
Right.
fluently. But then I came back to the States, started taking Spanish, and
Gotcha, gotcha,
it
gotcha.
left me.
Austin,
Yeah.
when you talk about this awareness of that, the achievement and the anxiety and the shame, did you have the awareness back then, or was that way, way, way down the road when you started reflection, or did you know those things when you were going through the younger age, 13, 14?
Not at all. I
Not at
actually
all.
didn't really connect any of those dots until I was probably in my 30s.
Gotcha,
It took a
gotcha.
long
All
time.
right, all
Yeah.
right. So you're 13, 14, getting a drink, getting a buzz off the drink. You're taking Xanax, pot. 15, 16, you're taking crack at this stage. Unbelievable. Wow. I suppose you can continue on the story. I'm curious to know how you were in school, academically, and then also just as a social being. What was your social person? Who were you as a person? Were you someone that stood
Yeah.
out, popular kid, cool kid, strange
Well,
kid?
I was never the popular kid, except so here's what I decided to do when I turned about 15 or 16 years old. I decided I was going to be the local weed dealer, and the reason, if I'm being honest, is because I knew if I always had drugs, people would let me in. They would let me go to their parties and all this stuff, right? Because that message I had early on that if I don't have something, then they don't let me play. And
Right,
so I did. I became the local drug dealer, which for whatever it was worth was a thing that I did. And when I was junior moving into senior year of high school, I was growing weed in my closet, and my mom knew about it. And she one day she had hung up some clothes over my grow lights, and I was a very bad weed grower. Like they were male plants, meaning there was no buds coming off of them. And she hung up some clothes over my grow lights, and I turned them on at about 7 p.m. And by 8:30 p.m., I had completely burned my house to the ground, gone. And again, this was just another heaping pile of shame in the piece of crap that was
right,
Austin at this
right,
point,
right,
and
right.
so it was actually after this point. So I didn't start smoking crack until I was 17. And it was right after this point. It was a client of mine that I was selling weed to, who one day was just like, do you know where to get cocaine? And I did, because I played football with all the guys who sold cocaine. And so I went and got it for him at cost. And eventually he was just like, do you want to try
Mm,
this? And I said, yeah, I do. Yeah, I'll
right,
try that.
right. Austin,
You know?
I love the story so much so far. And again, I talked about why it's so important to me, these stories. Why is it? And the listeners, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I also want to pause and just, I like to sit on the thought, is what I call it. All of what you've just said, 13, taking alcohol, drinking, drinking alcohol, taking pot, ecstasy, then you're going up through these ages, you're starting to sell pot, you're also taking crack, you've burned your house down by being a drug dealer already. That's just a substantial story for your teenage ages. Now imagine the residue, the damage that might be done for coming into 20s. We haven't even gone to the 20s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say stories are so important, because we might look at our story and go, wow, our story is so bad. I'm the worst person in the world. I can't do anything about it. It's always I'm fear, doubt, shame, regret, you know. Imagine the listener right now, whatever your story is, I don't know if it's going to be compared to Austin. Comparison might not be the best thing to do in some ways, but when we can really actually go, holy crap, if he's gone through this, there's definite insights that I can go through here. I'm taking a list of wild stories that you have, or wild situations, and I'm going to keep adding to this list, but I think we're at 17 or 18 years old, and I'm loving it so far. So please keep going, Austin.
Sure, I will. So I did graduate high school. I managed to get good grades, and mainly
4.0.
that was
Yeah.
because no, it wasn't that high. But what had happened, my parents got divorced when I was 13, and we moved from Tampa to this little town called Brooksville, which is just north of Tampa, but it's a farming town, a bunch of cow fields and farmers. And my high school, the academic requirements of my high school were not stringent. And so I ended up graduating with a fairly high GPA and got a partial scholarship to go to college at the University of South Florida.
Right.
And so I go to college at age 17 and I proceed to just go full on into addiction.
Right.
Stopped going to
Austin,
class.
how are you feeling at this time? Do you feel like there's any shame, any guilt, or are you like, this is great, I love life, I'm like I'm the king of the hill here, nobody can touch me, I'm right, I know what I'm doing. I mean, how do you feel at this time?
Mhm. I feel so. I remember one time, and this is, I would pull back on this as a feeling. I remember one time being in my dorm room, having come down off of all the drugs and being in so much fear of the world that I wouldn't go get myself food from the cafeteria because I was scared to do it. Like that's the level of, it was very polar. I was
Mm,
very I'm partying. The money runs out. I'm gonna hide under my covers and not
mm,
get out of bed. That's really where I was at. And it was I was just constantly chasing relief,
right.
and which meant the relief got less and less, and the
Yeah.
the horror feeling got more and more
What would
as
you
we
have
went along.
said at that time at 17? Would you say you're chasing the high? Would you say you're chasing the party? You're chasing the status? I mean, right now, again, reflection
Mm.
seems that you are chasing the relief now in reflection, knowing what you actually were doing. But when you were saying to yourself there, would you have been saying to you, like, this is great, I love life, I'm looking forward to the weekend, going partying? Is that what you were,
No,
all that narrative you were saying to yourself? True, the active
no,
addiction?
because there was no weekend. I was drinking and getting high every single day, the moment that it was available to me, and I was definitely chasing the high,
Right.
and Xanax came into play a lot here, so I was blacking out a lot. I was blacking out and then doing crack or cocaine on top of that, and
Right.
so
Is
that
that
was that
college?
was my favorite. Yeah, college. Yeah, and I ended up flunking out. Just well, I quit going to class, and so I end up going back and living with my mom right after this in Brooksville. She's like, "Come on home. Clearly, college is not for you." And yeah, she was right. And so I go back home and I proceed to decide to sell drugs again and end up getting arrested a number of times. And this time I got arrested with pills and I got arrested with weed. And actually one of those times I had crack in the car, but they didn't find it. And so my parents didn't know what to do with me. I mean, I was in bad shape at this point. And so they sent me to this place called Teen Challenge. And Teen Challenge is essentially it's a faith or religious based, I wouldn't call it a rehabilitation center because it's not, but it's a faith based center for drug addicts. And the idea is you go there and you're going to work and you're going to read the Bible and you're going to go to church. And somewhere along the way, the desire to use drugs and alcohol is going to be expelled. Well, that was not my experience. I spent 18 months there, right, doing the whole deal, and I drank the day I got out. And like
Wow.
I have some respect for them in the sense that they were trying to tell me, okay, you need to find a spiritual experience, but they never explained to me what I had. They never explained to me what addiction and alcoholism actually is. And if I'm not impressed with the problem, I'm not going to be impressed with your solution to my problem because I don't think I need it.
Right.
And so, I got out of there, and within, gosh, I don't even know how long it was, I had a severe overdose on methadone,
Mm.
crack, and Xanax. And
Yeah,
I ended up,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, if you want to go, you ended up what?
Yeah. I was just gonna say I ended up in the ICU for 7 days,
Right.
catheter, the whole nine. Like I almost died.
It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I am breathtaking so far. I love it. Again, I love it because you're here. I don't love it if you're still doing it and you're still going through it. Why did
Okay.
you drink the day you came out? I mean, 18 months is a staggering amount of time where you were completely sober for 18 months and then you drank that day you came out. If so, why?
Yeah, good question. And I think if any real alcoholic or addict is honest with you, he might give you a number of reasons. I might say to you, oh, I got out and, somebody made me
Right.
feel uncomfortable, or I got out in XYZ. But the truth is, if I could really call into my mind all of the consequences and the horror that drugs and alcohol have caused me, no catalyst is going to be sufficient for getting back into drugs and alcohol. And the truth is, I did it because I was an alcoholic and an addict at that point. That was just what I was going to do. There wasn't really a catalyst, or
Yeah.
what you might call a trigger.
And do you think that you were participating full steam in that facility for the 18 months and then just none of those tools at that time? Because I know we've got more facilities, but at that time they weren't registering with you because you didn't understand the problem, as you mentioned. Uh,
There weren't a lot of tools. I'll be honest with you. It was a lot of biblical study, which I'll tell
all
you I've used later in life. And it was a lot of church, but it was kind of like we're all sitting here waiting for a miraculous event to take
right.
place.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you come out of that facility for 18 months, you drink that day, you have an overdose the week later, you're in ICU.
Yeah.
Um,
And so it wasn't a week later. It was probably within the next year that I
sure,
was
sure.
in ICU. And so my grandfather offers me the option to go to rehab. And it is so very obvious at this point that I need intense help.
Mm.
And my response to him was like, well, let me think about it. Like, I got so much going on here. Wouldn't want to leave my trailer and my job selling furniture. And so eventually I never come to the conclusion of a yes. And so eventually my mom shows up at the door and says, pack your stuff. We're going right now. And I was just so broken at that point that I said, okay, I'll go. And this is my first entryway into 12-step recovery, which, they did not allow the 12-step programs to go into Teen Challenge, because in a 12-step program, you can choose what your higher power is. But in Teen Challenge, you could not. It is
All right.
this one, you know? And so, I spent 45 days at this rehab, and I think I got some good information, and information is great as far as it goes, but it's information has never kept me sober. I'll drink in the face of information. And so I get out of here after 45 days, and I had convinced them on my way in that I needed a prescription for Klonopin, benzodiazepine. And rehab centers should not give a narcotic to somebody who's coming in for narcotics addiction, but they did.
How
And
did you convince
so,
them, Austin? I'm sure our
well, I
listeners would
told them,
love to know that that trick.
sure. So this this particular rehab did not have a detox facility, right? So they were assuming you were already detoxed. And I convinced him by saying I've been on a benzodiazepine prescription for a number of years. Truth was, I think I had a bottle somewhere with my name on it. And if they didn't give it to me, I was going to go into full blown
And
withdrawal.
they didn't have the
And I was a
detox
cat.
center, so yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So that was my manipulation. And 4 days before I'm supposed to get out, so like on day 41, my grandmother dies. And she's, she was like my bestie. I loved my grandma so much. She was an alcoholic. And so I get out a couple of days later, and they discharge me with these huge prescriptions full of Klonopin, benzos. And so the second I get on the bus to go to where my grandparents lived, I'm popping these things, and I immediately black out. And my grandparents live in this giant retirement community in the middle of Florida called the Villages. And when I say giant, it almost extends like half of the state. It's
Right.
huge, and so I'm blacked out on the bus. And when I get there, when my grandpa and my mom go to sleep, I decide in my blacked out state that I'm going to steal his golf cart and try and pawn it for crack so that I can get high. But I steal this golf cart thinking I'm going to go find the hood where I'm going to buy some drugs. But it's a giant retirement community. There's no hood to be found. And so not only did I get lost, but the battery ran out. And so on the morning of my grandmother's funeral, my mom and grandpa have to send a tow truck to get me because the battery ran out. And it was just such a horrific scene because he was the one that had paid to send me to rehab. Right. He cared. He wanted to see me get better. And I literally got out of rehab and went and stole from him. And so the next day I go to my dad's house in Tampa. And the idea is he's going to take me to this halfway house in North Palm Beach, Florida. And I go to my dad's house and it's about 2 in the afternoon and he goes to take a nap. And somehow I had $150 in my pocket. I don't quite remember how I got it. And I go hop in a cab and I have him take me to 22nd Street because back when I was 14, 22nd Street is the spot you went to if you wanted to buy drugs. But now, is it 8 years later? I think it was like 8 years later, right? I'm down there in my funeral clothes, walking around, and nobody will sell me drugs. Like, it was not a
Mm,
good part of town. The
mm,
taxi driver was like, I'm not waiting for you, dude. I'm out
mm.
of here. And so I'm walking around. And finally, after like a half hour goes by, these two guys come up to me, and I remember them clear as day. It was one heavy guy and one skinny guy. And the skinny guy had a shirt on that said, "No snitching at any time, by order of the Ghetto Republic." And I was like, all right, maybe these are my guys. So I give them the money and they hand me 5 baggies of crack. And the second I put it in my pocket, I'm slammed up against the brick wall behind me. And it was a police sting.
Wow.
And yeah. And so I spend the next like 35 days in jail in Tampa.
You're
And
22 at this stage. I think you said 14 and 8 years. You're 22, yeah?
yeah, 22.
Yeah.
That's right. And this was over Thanksgiving of 2005. So that's when that was. And so I get out of there. My dad drives me down to North Palm Beach and he pays 2 weeks of my rent, says, "Good luck. Don't come home." So it was now at this point that truly the consequences had gotten to the stage where I must do something. And not to mention, because of that, I caught a felony charge. And so I was on drug offender probation, which means you've got to check in weekly and you've got a P test and all that different stuff. And so this is my first real entryway into 12-step recovery. Like, I got introduced to it at rehab, but this is the place where I start going to meetings and doing different things. And I was at a meeting one day and I remember sharing that I was having these dreams. And the dream was that I would go buy drugs, and right before I could get the lighter up to the end of the pipe to hit it, I'd wake up with my heart pounding out of my chest. And I had this guy come up to me after a meeting. His name was Paul. And Paul shared with me some of the dreams that he had experienced, which were similar to mine. And it was the first time ever in my entire life that I truly ever had the feeling, you are not alone. Like, somebody else is just as whacked out as you are. And that started, my first large stint of sobriety, which was not a permanent sobriety, but it was a large stint of sobriety. And
So,
so I stayed.
Austin, just on that there, that's your third rehab center that you're going into now at this stage, or are you just going to
to
meetings on this?
No, so that was, I've been to 2 rehabs, Teen Challenge, and
Yeah.
then the Choices Rehab at
So
this
then,
point. And then the halfway house. There's a halfway house. Yeah.
and the one where you're meeting Paul, is that a different one, or is that just meetings that you're going to?
No, so that's just meetings that I'm going to, because at this halfway house, you're required to go to like 5 meetings a week. And
Gotcha.
so it was at a little 12-step clubhouse by
Gotcha.
where we were living. And so at this point, I do work the steps and I get 2 years of sobriety. I have a small relapse, and then I have 7 years of sobriety after that. Life gets good. I start a business that becomes very successful. I get married. I
Very
have
successful.
my first 2 kids that are now 15 and 12. But eventually what ended up happening is the life that sobriety had given me started to take me away from the things that had given me sobriety. And
What do you mean by that?
well, in my experience, and this may not be everyone's experience, but in my experience, there are some things that are really important to staying sober. Connection with other sober people. Honesty is a big one. Honesty with ourselves and honesty with other people. Inventory is a really big one. Like, because the truth is, I don't see the truth about my own life. I can look at it from different perspectives, but as an alcoholic, I will lie to myself and believe it, And so as I started signing a bunch of people's checks and I had a legion of sponsees, right? Essentially, I hid at the front of the room by saying the right things. But what I learned really is that 90% of my sobriety, of anyone's sobriety, really happens when no one else is looking. Like, it's what are you actually doing? Like, are you really doing these things in your life, or are you just at a meeting saying you're doing these things to sound good and make friends, And so, but I ended up picking up after that, and this was in 2014.
Right.
And
What age
when
are
I
you
was
now,
using
Austin? What age are you now? You're around 31, 32 or something like that?
Yeah. So I had just turned 31 at this point.
Yeah.
And, I had money now, because I had had a
How did the
successful
business
company.
do? How did that business do? I believe it was millions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It was, we were making about $400,000 a month, for a while. And I lost that company, in this next phase of my story, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
So,
and so I go, I'm sorry,
you
go ahead.
know, I mean, just imagine the listeners here and me. I'm sitting here, right? You've already got this wild story so far. You got married, you had kids, you had this business, and now you're about to tell me in this phase, the next phase where you've lost this. I mean, wow, what a roller coaster!
Yeah.
But please, I'm entertained, and this is amazing.
Yeah,
So
sure.
please go ahead.
That's fine. Yeah, no problem, buddy. So, so what happened is in 2013, the woman that I was married to relapsed. And this was an I couldn't even imagine it. Like our whole
Right.
life was being sober. And after she relapsed, I really just I started to go downhill fast. I was not focusing on me. I was focusing on her and how we looked and all these different things that just really were not conducive to a spiritual way of life. And when I ended up picking up again, and I had also picked up a gambling habit. So a little gambling habit.
You
It
you
was
were
a big
doing that
gambling
through your
habit.
stint of sobriety. You picked up the gambling habit, or that was at the end.
Well, it was in my stint of sobriety, yeah,
Yeah.
that I had started to find a love of casinos and slot machines and
Right.
blackjack and all that.
And also on your wife, I think you're ex at this stage. I'm not sure, but on your wife
Yeah, yeah.
there, um, her life was dedicated to sobriety, as you mentioned. What was some of the patterns that she fell into just on that of how she would have relapsed?
Sure. So here's what happened. She got in a car accident in, I want to say, 2012. She was rear-ended.
Right.
And during that time, secretly, she had started ordering painkillers on the internet and taking those painkillers, which I was, I didn't really know that she was doing that until it all came to a head one day and she started drinking alcohol again, which she was a real bad alcoholic. She would drink alcohol last. Like that's how bad of an alcoholic she was. And so I was on a ski trip, with my little brother, and I got a phone call that she was drinking.
Right.
And so anyhow, yeah, that's a story in and of
For
itself. But
sure. For sure. It's okay. Yeah.
yeah, suffice it to say, like I didn't handle it in the way that I should have handled it, which was to lean on my supports and to, start getting honest about how I'm feeling and how I'm experiencing all of this. And what I really did was I became really angry and resentful and fearful, and so
Mm-hmm.
this relapse in 2014 is horrific. I go I'm spending on a monthly basis $40,000 or $50,000 on drugs. Like it was a crazy high amount. And eventually I end up in and I think there was 2 or 3 little rehabs in between here that I ended up in, one in Arizona, couple of detoxes, and then I end up in California eventually. In Huntington Beach detox, going to a place called Choices. And when I got to Huntington Beach, I was in stage 4 renal failure. My body was shutting
Wow.
down because I had such a pill habit at that point that I had just like killed my kidneys. And I had also overdosed another time. And so that really hurt my kidneys a lot. And so, they detox me. It takes a couple of weeks and I've got fluids pumping through my body all the time. If I wanted to walk around, it was with, a little bag.
Mm.
And I go to Promises, and this is a weird rehab. It was a very good rehab, but it was a weird one because it was this place called Promises for Professionals. So there's 2 Promises. There's one in Malibu, which is like where the movie stars go, and then
Yeah.
this was one that was for like doctors and lawyers and stuff. I was not a professional, but the people that got me into this place were the people that worked for me. And so they got me into this place, and they quickly diagnosed me as a severe narcissist. And I didn't really know what that word meant. But what I did know is my personality seemed the same as everyone else in here. Right. So I'm like, I guess I'm in good company, but I didn't know like what a terrible way of being that actually was. And so while I'm there, it had just gotten really bad with my first wife. She started smoking crack. Um, and she ended up trying to
Wow.
run away with her drug dealer. And so my therapist says, you can leave her. And I said, God, that wouldn't be fair to my kids. And she said, is it fair to them now? And boy, that really hit me, because it wasn't fair to them. My parents and her parents were the ones that were basically raising them at this point. And so I start the divorce proceedings. And while I'm there, there's this girl that's working there who had been a lesbian for like 6 years prior to that, or maybe her whole life. I don't really want to say how long. And as I'm telling my first wife that we're going to get a divorce, I see her head whip around, the lesbian girl. And I went, wow, that was weird. And she was really like hot. And so, anyhow, long story short, this girl ends up leaving her job at Promises, and she had 7 years of sobriety at this time, and moving back to Florida with me. And we start to relapse together. And
Wow.
there were two things that I didn't know about this girl when I had first met her. The first was that she had really, really bad drug-induced schizophrenia that was under control, because she hadn't used. But as
Yeah.
soon as she entered drugs in her system, she went nuts. And the reason she had that terrible schizophrenia was because she came from a mafia family, and she had grown up seeing horrific things. And so, we'd be smoking crack, and this girl would be like out on the fourth floor balcony doing handstands on the railing. Like, I'm like, you're out of control. So we
Jeez,
go on
right.
we go on a terrible run, dude.
Jeez.
Terrible.
Austin, sorry to dodge again. It promises. What
No,
rehab facility is that for you? Which one is that? Where are we on that list?
I think Promises is number 6, 5 or 6.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so me and this girl, we go on a huge run. I end up marrying her the day after I divorced my first wife. And I remember very clearly, like, my first wife, and this is before I was going to divorce her sitting me down when I was running hard. And she was trying to be sober at this time.
Mm.
And she said to me, if you keep drinking and using like this, you're going to lose us. And it didn't even register the way that it feels inside of my body so after I've used, my brain just says more and more and more.
Mm.
And when my brain's in that state, the way that it feels is like somebody's holding my head underwater, and I'm going to do anything I've got to do to get that next breath. And so me and this girl go on a run, which culminates in me and her being in a hotel in Fort Lauderdale. I'm in the bathroom about to shoot heroin, and the cops kick the door in.
Wow.
And what had happened was, so we have a thing here in Florida that's called a Marchman Act, which is if you are using drugs to where you can prove that this person's probably going to die soon, you can get the courts involved. And so my brother did that, my little brother, and he probably saved my life. And so they kick the door in, and they take me to detox. And the next day after I get out of detox, I go in front of this magistrate who says, okay, you can either go to jail or you can go to rehab. Take your pick. And so I said, okay, I'll go to rehab. Right. So this is number 6 or 7. And about 8 days later of rehab, me and wife number 2 end up running out of there, grabbing all of our stuff. They're calling the cops. We're hauling ass. We're like, call the cops. We don't care. And we just, we called the drug dealer, hopped in an Uber, and we decided that. So what she had said to me was, the judge said that you had to go to rehab. She didn't necessarily say you had to go to that rehab. Why don't we go back to California? And I was like, what a lovely idea. Let's just do that. Of course, that was a terrible idea. And so as we're on the way to the airport, though, and I had already bought my tickets to LA, I changed those tickets.
Here we go.
And
Here we go.
And we go to Cancun, Mexico.
Cancun, Mexico, and this is also a very interesting part of the story. Austin, for that element of Promises, how long sober? Let's go back a little bit. When you got out of Promises, how long were you sober with that second wife before you started taking drugs and started using?
I want to say, if I include the time that I was in
8
Promises,
hours.
about no, probably 2 months after I left there. And that's only because my second wife was a sober person.
Gotcha.
And I knew I couldn't do it around her. And so I had to start kind of doing it. And then,
You got caught.
it was a
What
whole,
about heroin? That was the first time I heard you mention the word heroin. Were you taking heroin
yeah.
back when you were taking crack earlier on, or was that start at 25, at 30, or?
No. So I really didn't start injecting heroin until the run that I just told you about. So I had a friend who was also on a relapse,
Mm,
and he was a heroin guy. So
mm,
he like
mm,
showed me how to do it. And
mm.
because I was just buying all the drugs. Like how much drugs do you have? Just let me buy all of them. And I just didn't I have this thing where I hate running out of drugs. Imagine that. And so
Had.
I started buying and shooting heroin,
Mm, mm.
and
Austin,
luckily this was not the fentanyl time.
fentanyl. All right. I didn't see that on the owl agenda, but maybe we'll get to that. I would love to know the difference between those substances for your perspective. Are you going to tell us here in the next phase that you got the fentanyl on your agenda? Is that right?
Well, I do end up doing some fentanyl, but it's after Mexico.
All right. I'll ask that question at that time to comparison the
Yeah, yeah.
feelings and yeah. But please, you you,
Well,
you
I could
changed the
tell
point.
you, yeah, I could tell you a little bit about that as we're going along because these are really important. Remember from the very beginning, right? Like I've just got this massive anxiety inside of me. And when I started doing drugs, a lot of those neurological tics chilled out. They just kind of stopped a little
Right.
bit. But smoking crack doesn't help anxiety and increases it.
Mm,
But the Xanax, that fixed the anxiety, right? And
right.
so we land in Cancun, and I've got, God, I don't know, $1 million or so in the bank, and it's paradise. It's like, okay, I start, we're taking a taxi to our hotel. I don't know where we're going to stay or how long we're going to stay. And the taxi driver is like, "Do you want to buy some blow?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And he
Wow.
tries to hand me a gram, and I'm like, well, "What am I going to do with this? Where can I get something more?"
Mm,
And so Cancun is a very interesting place in that it's the number one tourist destination in Mexico, and it's relatively safe for tourists because it is completely run by the Sinaloa cartel, top to bottom. You can't be a taxi driver, a police officer, anything in
interesting.
the city of Cancun. You've got to you got to be in with
Yeah,
them.
yeah. Austin, how much is a gram of cocaine in
In
Cancun? How much is a
Cancun,
gram? Yeah.
God, that's a good question. In Mexico City, it was very, very cheap, but in Cancun, it was probably, I don't know, $50 or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
Um, Later on, when I land in Mexico City, it's garbage cocaine, but it was very cheap.
All right.
So also on our first or second night there, I asked somebody, where I can get some Xanax, and he takes me to a pharmacy after hours, and I get a literal pharmacy delivery service that will bring me as many bottles of Xanax as I can handle.
Wow.
And so this starts a run unlike any other run that I've ever had. It was the run that I had no known enemies to my use, meaning there was no recovery friends that were going to screw this up. No cops were going to screw this up. My parents were not going to show up and tell me to stop doing it. Um, what ends up happening is my second wife gets deported back to the United States because she's so schizophrenic and so crazy that she starts getting arrested. And she got
Right.
arrested like 5 times. And eventually the government said, get rid of her, like get her out of
Wow.
here.
Wow.
And so it's me in Mexico.
Right. And Austin, you were supposed to be going back to California, but you changed your flights to go to Cancun, and now you're alone in Cancun.
Yeah. Well, I
Mm,
was never really alone. I always found companionship. Like there is, it's not hard to find
for
companionship in
sure.
Cancun, right? There's plenty of that.
And
And but I'm living in this, pretty beautiful little condo on Cancun Beach. And I never once set foot on the beach. I mean, not one time in the entire time I was there because I was just doing drugs the whole time. And
mm,
so the cartel, made it their mission to ensure that I had as much as I wanted, as often as I wanted. I always had kind of, for lack of a better term, a handler, the person that was in charge of making sure that I was taken care of. And that meant in all aspects, right? There was, 5 or 6 times where I got pulled over by the police and they, pulled some drugs out of my car and, with a quick phone call, they gave me the drugs back and
mm.
went on their way. That's Mexico. And
Austin,
so,
how much are you taking on a daily basis, give or take, right now?
yeah. So on the cocaine side, it was about an ounce a day, maybe a little
Wow.
bit more. It's a lot. I would only sleep very briefly, once every like 3 days, and only when my body would give out. But on the Xanax side, at my peak, I was taking 50 milligrams, 50, like 25 Xanax bars a day,
Right.
and I would eat them in handfuls of 5, like every 4 hours. But I was smoking crack alongside of them, right? And I'm pretty sure, if I had to take a guess, I'm pretty sure the Xanax saved my life, kept my heart from blowing up. Like
Unbelievable.
it was intense.
What's
And
your diet like here, Austin, when you're in Cancun? What's your diet like? What's your routine like as well? How are you living life on a day to
yeah,
day outside of those
let me
things?
tell you about it, Gary. Um, so you know how addicts will know this for sure. Those damn birds that always tweet at about 5:30 in the morning, right? And the shame hits, and you're like, shit, I got to go to work. And you know, like I would hear those birds in Cancun, and it would just be another day. It was like, oh, okay. And I always thought I was much funnier on day 2 and day 3, even though I'm like kind of hallucinating from no sleep.
Mm.
But it was just a constant party, like girls in and out of the condo. I'm constantly drinking, constantly eating Xanax, and then as far as nutrition was concerned, I would make it a point to go out to eat at about 2 in the morning. And what I would
Wow.
do is I would put a bunch of crack in a bag, put it in my pocket with a pipe, and go down there, do a few shots of tequila, and eat chicken wings. That was basically what I would eat. And really, there was very little else that I put in my body
Unbelievable.
that was not drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
Are
pretty much
you
it. And
working
that
as
was
well, Austin?
no. So the company that I had in the United States, because everyone that worked there was sober, after I had been in Mexico for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months, they closed it down. They were like, well, we're not going to continue to fund your drug habits. So they all just went and got new jobs and
Mm.
closed the company down.
Mm.
Right. And I didn't even like make an attempt to save it. I was too whacked. Like I didn't even try. And so I'm severely addicted at this point, not even realizing how much money I'm blowing through, or that, hey, maybe I should think about the future a little bit. I mean, I think there was a part of me that just went to Mexico assuming I would die. I had enough
Mm.
money to do it, and I was just going to die before the money ran out. And at the end of this, I end up in Mexico City. And so, wife number 2 is gone. I cycle through a number of girlfriends or hostages, however you want to put them, who do drugs with me and then go a little bit cuckoo. And then me and this guy Yvonne, who was like one of my, he was kind of a friend, but he was like a handler, to make sure the money kept flowing. He and I would go to Mexico City to party. And one of the times we went to Mexico City, this girl just totally fell in love with me. This Mexican girl, and she was a sweet girl too. Like, did not do drugs or anything. I don't know why she liked me. And so, but anyhow, I had met her on one visit, and then I went back to Mexico City and got my wallet stolen. So I had fake Mexican credentials made for me. We had bribed
Mm.
some government people to make me a Mexican national, and I got my wallet stolen, so I couldn't get back on the plane to go back to Cancun. And so I called this girl, and she says, you come live with me and my mom. And so she lived in a city called Coacalco, which is on the outskirts of Mexico City in what they would call the state of Mexico. And so I take a taxi to this girl's house. And what I experienced there is something unlike I'd ever seen in my life. So the money was really out at this point. Like I didn't have much left. And
How long was that,
and
Austin?
this
How long was that from when you had a million arriving in the country till then? How long was that till that money was diminished?
I think we're at about 15 or 16 months right now.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
And
I spent about
how's your Spanish? I asked how your Japanese is. How's your Spanish at this time? Are you fluent?
yeah. So in Cancun, I didn't need to learn Spanish, but in Mexico City, they don't care if you don't know Spanish. They're going to speak Spanish to you. And
Right.
so I did actually. So this girl that I'm referring to now, she started to teach me Spanish because she had learned English from English movies, and so I started to catch on kind of a little bit.
Right.
But here's what happens. She takes me to her mom's house, and as we're walking there, I start to notice it looks like not a good area of town. But what I was actually seeing was exactly how everyone there lived, right? It had these big water tanks on the top of the roof of the apartments. I didn't understand what those were for, and they were kind of like cinder block green, like this color of my shirt. And I walk in their house, and and her mom had dinner waiting for me. And I look really bad at this time. Like I'm skinny, the whole nine.
Right.
And I met two of the kindest, sweetest, most loving people I had ever encountered in my life. And, they did not have an iPhone, they could never even fathom, having $1,000 US. Their rent, I think, was $100 a month. Right. And they were completely unencumbered by all of the things that I was constantly chasing in the United States, which was that if I achieve, I'm worthy. It was all just really driven with that unworthiness factor. And so I would love to say something shifted for me during this time, but really it shifted in retrospect when I looked at it after and I saw the impact that they had on me. So I end up staying in Mexico City for about 5-6 months. It culminates in me and this girl breaking up. And I'm so severely depressed and addicted that it's just, the poor girl, she like wanted to get married. And I'm like, girl, I'm here for the drugs. Like when they run out, I'm going. And she didn't like that at all, with good reason. And so I end up living at my drug dealer's house, this guy named Juanito. Nice guy. I think he's dead now, honestly.
Wow.
And yeah. And so the cocaine here is 300 pesos, which, for a gram, which is about $20 a gram. Right. It was straight garbage. But I took what I could get. And my final night there is me sitting on a couch across from him at 2 a.m. with a gun pointed at me because I owed him money. And he thought I had disrespected his dog also, which was a funny, but not so funny story. And the next day, a friend from the United States bails me out, sends me a Western Union with the promise that I will come home. And 3 days later, I was on a plane back to the United States. And I show up broken, right? I lost everything in life, everything. No kids, no family, no business, nothing. And I couldn't have been more grateful when I stepped off of that plane. Like it was really a weird sensation. And I thought I was just going to slide back into 12-step recovery. Like I've got the knowledge. I'm just going to go do this again. I had no clue how bad I had damaged my brain. And it culminates about 6 months later with me overdosing in a hotel in Delray, Florida. And my mom getting a detox to come pick me up. And then from that detox, I ended up going to my 7th rehab.
7th rehab, yeah. And Austin, when you get off
yeah.
the plane there, 6 months, were you using in that 6 months again? Or did you go into the 12 steps right away? Were you doing the halfway house, the detox in that 6 months before you overdosed?
I didn't want to go back into the 12-step fellowship that I was a part of before, I think because of shame.
Right.
And so I decided to go into its sister program, where I didn't really know anyone, which was fine. The rates of recovery are the same. But I just, I got a sponsor. I started engaging in some step work, but slowly but surely, my brain just started gnawing on me. And I picked up Kratom first, and started doing that. And then eventually I picked up, crack and fentanyl. This is where fentanyl comes in. Because it wasn't heroin at that point anymore. So that's how I ended up overdosed.
That's what you're saying. All right.
Yeah. I go on a really bad run. And so I ended up in rehab again. And this was a different, sort of rehab. It was, men only, which is good. Keep me from distractions. And the therapists were tremendous. And I remember one day, one of the therapists came in. Her name was Malia, and she put a picture of her daughter up on the wall. Cute 18-month-old little baby girl with blonde curls. And she said, what does this little girl have to do to deserve love? And of course, the answer was nothing. It's a little baby, right? And she made the very, very strong argument that the only difference between me and that baby was an idea. And the only one that had that idea was me. And it was really a kind of a watershed moment. Like it was a really important moment for me. And then, subsequently there was a lot of other stuff, but I got out of there, and this was a really earnest attempt at sobriety. And this is where my life starts to actually change, because I start making relationships not based on what I can bring to the table, because the only thing I've got to bring to the table is me. And I found out that actually was enough. that the people that wanted me in their life were the people I wanted in my life. And I go into a halfway house after this, start working for that halfway house. At 9 months sober, I end up meeting my wife, who we've been married for, we've been together for 9 years, married for 8 now. But from that day to this day, I haven't stayed 100% sober. I had a relapse 2.5 years ago on kratom and then some pills, which is where my 8th rehab comes in. And at this point, like today, I have 5 kids. At that point, I had 4 kids, and I remember being in there, and it was the first time where I had ever gone to a rehab where I already had everything I wanted in this world, right? My fear was not that I would never have it or that I couldn't rebuild it. My fear was losing it because I already had it. But I had drifted away from the recovery program that works for me, which is a 12-step fellowship. And things change. Like I became to show up as a dad, as a husband. We have three new, I have a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and then I have custody of my 12 and 15-year-old. So 5 kids under one roof. And it's an absolutely insane life, but it's the right life for me, man.
I mean, just Jesus Christ. Wow. Are you kidding me? This is the wildest story that I'm very grateful to have you on here, Austin. And I'd love to know some more interesting questions along that.
Please.
What was the lowest point through all of that story? And again, I look forward to sharing this list that I took down of absolute insanity. What was the lowest point for you throughout that list?
So the lowest point from a physical standpoint, like addiction standpoint, is that last night at Juanito's house when I'm on his couch and he's got a gun basically pointed at me, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay him off or if I'm going to be homeless and wandering the streets. But the lowest point emotionally, which I think is sometimes a lot more powerful than the alternative, was after. So it was in 2023, which is when I picked up kratom. And when that all came to a head, when it was like, this must stop, that was the lowest point for me emotionally, because I knew intellectually that I had everything in the world, but knowing that and experiencing that is not the same thing, and I had grown restless, irritable, and discontented in sobriety again.
Right.
And had no capacity to be honest about what was going on with me in real time. And it was the best thing that could have happened to me, to be perfectly honest, because our 5th child came about just after that, and I really needed to show up as the man that I am today for that baby.
Right. I love that physical and emotional element of the lowest moment. What is the relationship like with your dad? As you mentioned that in the past, I don't know if he's still here, God willing. And
he is. Yeah, so he actually beat cancer about 2 years ago. So my relationship with my dad is really great. He's an interesting guy. When he got divorced from my mom, so prior to, let's say, age 13, the way I would describe him is I experienced him as cold, distant, fun at times, but not necessarily an emotional guy. After he got divorced from my mom, he kind of went on this self-discovery journey. And, he kind of turned into a different guy, like a big-hearted, loving, very religious sort of guy.
He must have went to Cancun, did he? He went to Cancun and had
bingo. No, you know what he did? He bought a house on a lake and lived by himself for a couple of years. And like, he read the Bible and quit drinking and all sorts of different stuff. Sweet. But no, my relationship with my dad is really good. I should probably call him more often.
It sounds a lot better.
Now that you mentioned
it. A lot better than it was.
Much better. Much better. We go fishing every year. I take my 12-year-old with us. Like, it's great.
Awesome. Yeah, that is absolutely awesome. At this stage now, we're in recovery, and you are getting those 9 years of, with one lapse in there, you went to the facility. As you go through all those facilities, what was the best tools that you'll learn through any of those tools in the 12 steps? Whether if it's a certain week that you preferred, was it a certain exercise in there? What actually really worked for you in those things? Because I know a lot of people that I deal with in Ireland, actually they have a bit of resistance to 12 steps, AA, NAC, all that type of stuff. They're like, oh, it's too spiritual, too woo-woo. And, some people can get around and they're like, oh, that's, people will believe in it, but I like the stories, the positive, the good, the bad. for you, obviously going to all of these, you've got tons of experience. They didn't register when you were younger, but on reflection now, what were some of the good tools that actually stuck with you, or what were some
That's a
nice
great
ones?
question, man. That's a really good question. And for anyone that like is resistant to the spiritual side of things, like just having faith in the 12-step process is quite honestly spiritual enough.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't let the prejudice of spiritual things deter you from finding the solution behind them. But
right.
there were some things I really needed to learn about alcoholism and addiction. And one of them was that alcoholism is not the same as drinking and drugging. Alcoholism is the state, the underlying state that I'm trying to treat with the alcohol and the drugs, right? It's the state that I naturally enter into when you take the drugs away from me, the mental, emotional, and physical state.
Mm,
And so what we treat in 12-step recovery is not the drinking, right? I'm always going to drink and then drink compulsively past that if I put it in my body. And it's going to be the same with the drugs. But what we do treat are the mental, emotional, and physical and spiritual states that, accompany alcoholism. But what I learned is an alcoholic or an addict left untreated, right? If I'm really the type of alcoholic that we would talk about in the rooms, which is that when I start drinking, I have very little control over the amount that I'm
mm,
going to take. When I honestly, in my soul, want to stop drinking and find that I cannot quit entirely, if that's me, then just putting down the drink and the drug is not sufficient, right? Because putting it down, eventually I will be led back to it if I don't deal with the underlying symptoms. And I had a sponsor one time who said to me, I want you to pretend you've got a bomb strapped to your back with a timer on it. And that timer is guaranteed to explode one day unless you do certain simple things every single day for your recovery. And
mm.
if you do those things, it'll add some time to the timer. But if you ever stop, we don't know when and we don't know where, but that bomb is going to explode.
So, so
And that analogy really made sense for a guy like me who has had, listen, if information could keep me sober, dude, I would have been sober, early on and stayed that way. But the information without there's a guy I really like listening to. The information without the transformation, right, is like going to a restaurant and eating the menu, is what he says. And I was like,
100%.
yeah, dude, I get that. I get
100%.
that.
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people do these external actions to, read a journal, like gym, I diet, but actually there's still an underlying feeling that is there that's driving this. We know drugs synonymous with these sayings: running, filling a void, escaping. I need in every movie. I need to get my fix. My fix. My
Mm-hmm.
fix is this thing for the underlying thought process that we have that actually does need to be fixed. What are some practical things? You mentioned connection inventory as tools that you are like very
Mm.
important. That's to keep the bomb from blowing up. What would be the practical things in connection and also inventory that you would do or you have done that has worked for you or even for other people that works for them? Maybe writing a book is a great focus. Maybe focus is one. But what,
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you what it really boils down to. And
Yeah.
I learned some interesting things about kind of how the brain functions as we go along. And that we've got these neurological pathways that are dug out, right? Anytime I have an experience with a strong emotion, the brain says, we're going to take a snapshot of that. And if that was a time that caused me pain, the brain, these meaning making machines say, okay, that's the cause of that pain. So if I ever think that's coming again, you're going to experience fear on the inside, right? Because that's my defense
Mm,
mechanism to avoid, stay alive. But over time, and especially with addicts and alcoholics, I've seen this countless times, we're experiencing fear over all sorts of things that actually are not going to cause us any pain, but because of the way that my brain's wired, I think it's going to. And so that's what a lot of these tools are designed to do, is get down to the fear, look at the origins of those fears, but even more so, let's look at how I'm going about my day. Am I being selfish? Am I being dishonest? Am I carrying around resentment? Right? What are the fears that are driving me? And nobody really likes doing that process. I mean, maybe some people do, but if I didn't know in my heart that I was going to drink and use drugs again, if I didn't do these things, I probably would not do them. But at the end of it, what it really boils down to more than anything else is service. It all boils down to finding a way to be of service to somebody other than me. because one thing that is super characteristic of all alcoholics and addicts is we are incredibly self-centered. We don't even notice other people, right? You might be in the room, but I'm not thinking about how are you feeling? How am I impacting you, right? And so the 12-step recovery program, a massive part of it is we take on a life of service for other alcoholics and addicts and helping them. And that's a big part of sobriety. It really is.
I love taking these healthy, helpful notes. Connection, inventory, service, underline those, self-reflection. You talked about nobody really likes doing that work. Absolutely. I actually think a lot of people don't know how to do that work in some way. They know how to go to the gym. They know how to take these external actions. But when it comes to inner work, deep work, there's a lot of complications for people. I don't know where to start. I don't know how. Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? And I'm not saying you need to answer those things, but yeah, actually, I had a session with my coach that I get every week, and he was working on a belief that I have or a thought process that I have, and I'm sitting there like I'm not tired because I've exercised hard. I'm not tired because it's sunny. I'm tired because I'm literally changing those pathways that you're talking about, and I'm going in different
Yeah.
direction. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is so much of a strain. That very real stuff through those pathways. That was a question there, but oh yeah, did you have again? This is not a normal question, quote unquote, but about ego and that idea. Did you have, and you might have to think a second or two to answer, did you have an ego death? Did you have an idea of where harsh reality hit you in the face a few times, where all your world started crumbling down? Did you have a perception of life and perception of yourself that you needed to break down, and how hard was that? Again, that's
That's a
take a second or
that's a
two. I
really
mean,
good question. I actually have multiple little experiences with that
all right,
along the way.
that's
like I
awesome. Thank
remember
God.
being in yeah, I remember being in the rehab in Del Rey. So this is in 2017 after Mexico. And standing on the back porch and the people that worked there were saying to me things like they would want to read the big book with me or some other literature, and I would say yeah, I had a lot of sobriety time, I know this stuff, and they would hit me between the eyes. If you knew it, you wouldn't be here. And but I remember standing on the back porch thinking all of the things that I defined myself by, which was, it was money, it was company, it was sobriety, it was
Yeah.
family, all those things that I had defined myself by. Every one of them had been taken away from me. I gave them away. And
Mm,
so the question really was, if those things could go away, were they ever really me to begin with? And the honest answer is no, right? When we use the word ego are the various ways in which I identify myself. It's also a way I use to separate myself from other people. And so that's when, kind of an interesting journey started. But the thing about that ego is it will reassert itself. And I've had multiple instances of reassertion of ego,
mm,
during my time. But where it has not reasserted is like, I have a great life today. I have a great business, very successful. It's actually more successful than the first one. And it has not yet reasserted itself in that realm,
well
but
done.
it can reassert itself in my home, for example. This was one area where I really had to work quite a bit. Like, I don't know if you know this or not, Gary. Are you married?
No,
Are you married? You have a girlfriend?
no,
No?
no.
Okay. Well, women are absolutely incapable of filling up their own water cup. I don't know if it's all women, but it's definitely my wife. Like, if I don't fill up her water cup, she will turn to dust before I get home, right? It's incredible. And so she would ask me to fill up her water constantly. And there would be times when in the back of my head I'd go, well, I wish you'd fill up my water sometimes, or these like little pride statements that would want to rear their ugly head. And I made a commitment a couple of years ago to just say yes to everything, just be of service in my own home. And what I found was, I think I had a belief or a fear within me that if I didn't stand up for my own rights and my own needs, that
Mm,
I was going to be somehow diminished as a result of that. But the truth was, what happened was I was diminished in no way. And my relationships were completely enhanced by me just deciding to be of service in my own home, right?
mm,
It's a little thing. It's a tiny little thing to get my wife water, right? It's not a big deal at all. But as a self-centered alcoholic and addict, I can make it into a big deal, you know?
You're literally talking about filling up the water bottle. You're not talking about filling up someone's emotional cup. You're literally talking
No, literal water, actual water. Yeah, no, definitely water.
Okay. Okay. That is hilarious. Austin, what I'll read out this list at the end. What maybe this could be the last category in some way. I've thoroughly enjoyed and I'm immense
Oh,
value,
same.
unbelievable. I'd be curious to know around the book what is in the book and you know what do you say in Wolf of Wall Street? Send me this book. You know, sell me this.
Yeah, yeah. Sell me this book. Well, here's the thing. The book is very, very detailed account of what happened. And it's not in any way flattering towards me. Right. I don't think you'll get to the end of that book and think, wow, Austin just came out shining like roses. It truly isn't. It took me 4 years to write it, and I had help. I had an author that helped me to write this book from
Right.
start to finish. And it was 4 years of me telling him my stories and him helping me to put them in some, context that would make sense in a book.
Hmm.
All of it's 100% accurate and true, but accurate is probably not the right word. It's accurate from my perspective. There's
Right.
always more than one perspective. And
What,
there's a
what did
lot
you
of
why
stuff in
did you
there.
write it, Austin? Why did you write it?
Honestly, I wrote it because so there were a number of reasons. I'll tell you the one that really landed on me, Gary. When I got back from Mexico and I started telling, like, some people had experienced me prior to Mexico. They knew I fled the country and they had kind of heard what was going on. And when I came back and I told them kind of what I was doing, a lot of people would say, oh, you should write a book. Well, okay, that's all cute and well. But I started having this feeling in my gut, like, dude, you just need to write this. And I didn't know what the reason for writing it was. I could tell you today, I've experienced a number of reasons that I'm really, really glad it exists. One of them was defragmenting my own story for me. But another reason is, anytime somebody reads this book, I feel like an intimate connection towards them, not because I know about them, but because I know you know about me, right? I'm bearing a part of my soul that I had extreme shame about for a long time. And so I'm really, really honored anytime anyone cracks the pages and reads through it. And, I've been told it's a very easy read, probably is. But it's a very detailed account of the story I just kind of bounced through with you.
It's an unbelievable story. Absolutely unbelievable story. You mentioned there one thing of like knowing your story to create or to get your story fleshed out. That actually is something that is a very useful tool for people to do. So they're not bouncing around from shame shivers, we call them, or I've heard them be called, where just randomly a shameful thought that you've had during addiction pops up in your mind. But if you can flesh out your story can then, like you can always, you're talking about pathways. You want that story to be your strongest pathway, that you could always go through this pathway rather than, oh crap, this happened, oh crap, that happened, oh my God, I'm bouncing around from everywhere and all of these thoughts. So knowing your story actually is a very useful thing for the listeners as well. And that's a beautiful point. Austin, do you have anything else? I'll happily let you plug yourself towards the end. But do you have anything else in your story, in yourself right now to mention?
Not really, Gary. I think, you know, I probably could have kept you here for 3 hours if I really got into the nitty gritty of the various things that
I
happened.
well
Well,
believe that.
there was a near kidnapping. There was a time when my throat got slashed. There was
Wow.
a whole lot of different things that happened while I was in Mexico. Um, but
All right.
if you're interested in the book, please take a look. But I love chatting with you, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to do so, Gary. Thank you.
You're very welcome. This has been a very, very successful first and last. It will just be last. There ain't going to be a peak after this. And it did definitely live up to the expectations. But let me go through this list that I was taking down from all these ages. And these are all just misery, devastating things. They're not the positives, right? I didn't include those things. But again, I'm putting this in context for other people listening to their own story, listening to their own BS, yeah? Their belief system, obviously, yeah? Listen, belief
Mm.
system, yeah, sure, BS. Them listening to their own story here and then realizing what story you have to face, listen to what story you have to listen to, listen to the amount of images and memories and traumas and situations, shames, guilts, resentments, like unbelievable list that you could hold on to, yet you're sitting here with a successful business, a marriage, kids, and custody. You've clearly done fantastic work. So there's clearly a lot of change in that. So drug dealing, taking Xanax, selling weed again. That was drug dealing. Burn the house down. You're drinking every day. You're getting high every day. You're blacking out. You're in college. You're getting blackout. You're taking crack in college. You're taking coke. You're getting arrested. I don't know if that's the first arrest. I think that's yeah, that's the first arrest where you got the crack story of you got set up. Yeah, you drank a day after rehab. You overdosed a couple of months after that. The rehab again. You were convinced another rehab facility about benzodiazepines and taking, and then you had a blackout with that. You stole a golf cart from your grandfather when your grandmother died. You know, he offered you to go to the rehab center there a moment ago. You got arrested again after 35 days. I don't know what the exact 35 days was. Arrested where your dad said, here's 2 weeks worth of rent. I'll see you later. I won't chat to you again. Don't come home. 31, then you had a bit of stint of sobriety there where the life hit you in the face. 40, 50K a month on drugs. You had a business successful. Then you lost your business. Your body was shutting down. You had another overdose. Your kids were getting raised somewhere else by your grandparents. You got divorced from your second wife at that stage. Oh no, so you got divorced from your first wife officially at that stage, and the next day you married another woman that then started heroin, or somewhere along the time you went to heroin. You went to Florida. You are taking drugs again after relapsing with this girl from Promises. Uh, you were then went to Mexico on the way over there. You were 2 a.m. You had a gun pointed at your head from the guy who's now dead in that situation. You got overdosed again for a third time, or at least on my list, third time. You were taking fentanyl at this stage. You kidnapped, throat slit again, and I actually just stopped taking notes at that stage because I think the up was on, the comeback was on, the
Yeah.
underdog, the Rocky story was on its way back. I mean, all of what I've just said there. How can any one of these listeners sit there and go, but I can't believe I've done these three, four, five things and this person and I've annoyed this person and I've done this. This is a unbelievable story. And when we have an unbelievable story, I hope we can put our story in perspective and go, you know what? I'm not living by my old story. I'm breaking through. What a testament. What an example. Living in service. Austin, I am.
Thanks, Gary.
Oh my God. Thank you very much.
I do
Honestly,
want to
thank you
share
very
one
much.
thing, if you don't mind, real
Absolutely.
quick.
Absolutely.
Everyone's thinking of anyone that's there who thinks, wow, but there's things I've done that I just can't, there's no way I could reveal or come back from. And I had those things, right? When I, in multiple step working sessions, like I had those things that I couldn't tell anyone because I knew if you knew this about me, we were done. You weren't going to let me play. And what I found was that connection, that real connection with other people actually came by me revealing those things, by me saying, hey, here are the things that scare me. Here are the things I'm ashamed of. Right. And I wasn't rejected.
Right.
I was brought in closer as a result. And so, I just wanted to share that. That was
Yeah.
just one experience that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. The story, knowing thy story, it's absolutely brilliant. Austin,
Yeah.
do you have a place where people can meet you? And again, I'm saddened that we are coming to a conclusion, but I'm very blessed. Really am blessed. I appreciate it. So where can people get you, Austin?
Yeah. So you can go to onelasthitbook.com. There's, if you wanted to buy the book, you can go to shop.onelasthitbook.com. It's also available on Amazon. I have a podcast called the One Last Hit Podcast where I kind of do what you just did with me, Gary. I talk to people in recovery. It is definitely a PG-13 rated podcast. So, don't let your 7-year-old listen to it, but it's a doozer. And so yeah, I'm happy to connect with anyone. I mean, that's the whole reason
Austin,
I'm
what is
doing
it
this.
called? What is your book called now? What is your podcast called? One last here.
So why is it called that? So here's the
Yeah.
book. It's a very graphic cover. Just so everyone knows what it's about. Because one last hit was the lie that I always told myself.
Yeah, 100%.
Just
Yeah.
one more,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely know that. I know one more, I'll get away with it. Nobody will know. It'll be, I'll stop at 12 just this weekend. All of these lies are consistently, and I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful. I appreciate it, Austin. Have a blessed time, and I hope to stay connected in some way.
Thank you so much, Gary. I appreciate it, buddy.
Awesome, awesome. See you.